Hello, everyone. I'm Beatrice Verhoeven, film editor at TheWrap, and we're so happy to have you here for our 2021 award screening of Them with Little Marvin, creator, executive producer, showrunner, and writer, and actors Ashley Thomas and Deborah Ayurinde. Thank you so much for joining me, guys. We're going to be showing you the trailer first, and then we'll go right into a conversation with our panelists. To our audience, please participate in the live chat of the stream, share your thoughts, tell us where you're tuning in from, all the good stuff. Before we introduce our special guests, here is the trailer of Them.
There is something wrong with this place. Something rotten.
Oh my. It's enough to drive you crazy, isn't it? To look. 'Cause baby, you're gonna need it.
Welcome back, and it's now my pleasure to introduce Little Marvin, Ashley Thomas, and Deborah Ayurinde. Thank you guys so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to chat about the show. I'm a big horror fan, and I kind of wanted to start off with you, Little Marvin. The show is not based on real people and real stories, but it's kind of an amalgamation of many different kinds of stories and events, right? I was wondering how much, research you did. How did you weave all the different stories together to create this particular story? And we'll go from there.
Sure. I think part of the journey of creating the show, and part of what I think surprised me the most about the creation of the show, was just how many Black folks experienced what the Emerys experience in our show. And, the sad truth is I could have placed this show anywhere across the country. It could have been in Chicago. It could have been in Lansing. It could have been Levittown, Pennsylvania, or a suburb outside of New Jersey. And the treatment and the terror and the tactics and these things were the same. I think what was sort of most kind of shocking and eye-opening to me was that here were experiences that I thought would have been very at home in the Jim Crow South, happening in sort of sunny suburban California, happening in Glendale and Pacoima and Santa Monica and Hancock Park, seeing families like Nat King Cole's family who had moved into Hancock Park and were subjected to much of what the Emerys experienced. So I think honoring those experiences across the country and across the Southland was the start of the journey. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And Ashley and Deborah, maybe Ashley can start. What drew you both to the project? Are you both horror fans as well?
Yeah, I would say that I'm a horror fan, but I'm not as big a horror fan as yourself and Little Marvin. I think one of my favorite horror films ever coming up was The Candyman. I think maybe because I would see that and see people who looked like me on the screen, and that is like a accurate representation of how the world looks to me. When I first got the scripts, I got the sides like every other actor. Your agent calls you up and says, got some sides for you, put yourself on tape if you want to do it. I read the sides and was intrigued immediately at the piece. And so I put myself on tape and sent it. And then I got immediate feedback, and then I was sent the script. So I was like, cool, let me read the script. And then as soon as I read the scripts, I was just like scared. I had a self-doubt and a fear within myself, just because the piece is so deep and so weighty and so important, I felt, and it tells the story of American history. And I just wanted to make sure that I could do the part justice, and that I had all the gears and layers inside of me to deliver the part authentically. I think for a lot of actors, especially for myself, you feel like I can do any part, give me any part I can do. And then as soon as it's in front of you, it's like, you start to really question yourself, like, can I really do this part? And I guess that's how I felt. I just, I wanted to do the part justice was the main thing. So when I flew out to do the screen test, I was really scared, just fearful of, I would say, my own ability. And these are just insecurities that you have in yourself, because in order to deliver these parts, you have to be vulnerable. So, but it was amazing writing is what first drew me to it. And it was written by a man who looks like me and who understands the nuances of what it is to be a Black man in the world, and cares for the characters individually, cares for Henry, cares for Lucky, cares for the whole world. And that was what was important to me, and that is what drew me to the piece.
And Deborah, what drew you to the project?
What drew me to the project, I think, kind of like what Ashley said, the writing first and foremost. I got sent, I think, the first 2 or 3 episodes, and my manager called me, and she was really, really excited. She was like, "There's this project, you know, it's the talk of the town. Like, put yourself on tape." Like most actors put themselves on tape. But she really talked it up, and I was like, okay. We have very real conversations about everything that comes in. And so I read it, and I was honestly blown away. I felt like whoever wrote this gets it, to put it plainly. And then I went in the room and auditioned in person. And then when I sat down with Little Marvin, we talked for Little Marvin and Miriam. We talked for I think it was like an hour and a half, almost 2 hours. And we literally it was so aligned. It was so easy. You know, our connection was so easy. So I felt like, not only do I want to work on this wonderful piece of art, but I also want to work with this person. I will feel honored, honestly, to bring what he's created to life. So yeah, for me, it was a no-brainer. I really, in my head, was just like, if they'll have me. I certainly had the fear. I certainly had the, can I do this? But I also, to be honest with you, was praying for a role that really, one, spoke a lot of truth to my experience as a woman, as a Black woman, but also a role that could really allow me to show what I could do. I feel like so many actors who really love the craft of acting really want roles that allow them to really play and show what they can do. And so when I read it, I felt like, this is it, if they'll have me, this is it. So yeah, that was my story.
Amazing. And Little Marvin, I wanted to talk about the horrors of the show. Obviously, there are jump scares in the show, but the inherent horror, as we've been discussing, is racism. There's also themes of family, terrors, lack of togetherness, loneliness. Did you always kind of want to tackle all these themes in this show together? And how did that kind of all get amplified together?
The short answer is yes. I've always been a huge fan of horror, particularly horror from the 1960s and 1970s. And not only their tone and their sort of the slow burn and the methodical nature of how the stories were unpacked back then, but also like, I love horror's ability to take really kind of thorny and complex issues and wrap it in a package that is almost, because it's like a roller coaster ride, because you're scared, because it's like, what's behind that wall? It allows you, I think, an entry point into the journey that it might not have had we just played the entire thing for drama. That said, obviously, there is a lot of drama in the show and at the heart of the show. But yeah, no, there was never any question. And I really like horror's ability to get at the sort of the internal, because as you know, this family is battling forces outside the house and inside the house, but also outside the house and inside themselves. There's an interiority to each of our 4 family members. They're all grappling with like a journey of self-love, of understanding, of their relationships to each other, their relationships to themselves. And so again, I think to do that through the lens of horror allowed us just a wealth of opportunities. Yeah.
Is there a topic that maybe was more of something you wanted to stay out of, or was there something that was off limits, or that you just didn't think really meshed with the overall themes being explored?
I don't think so. I think we were pretty clear on really what we wanted what our aim was. I think what I had never really seen myself was the terror of living in this particular time. I think like it's easy for us to see photos from this time period, and it's almost like these people are trapped in amber. There's a remove that's created. People look kind of stoic in the face of a lot of terror. You know, you see little Ruby Bridges on her way to school being flanked by US Marshals, and she's just got this stoic expression. And what I think is lost in that is that there was a child at the heart of that picture. There was a child, a 7-year-old, on her first day of school being surrounded with that kind of vitriol. And so what I hadn't really felt was what it would feel like to be at ground zero on the receiving end of that terror and of that gaze. And by the way, it's a gaze that stretches back to the very dawn of this country. So I think keeping the story focused there was always the goal.
Interesting. And Ashley and Deborah, what for you was kind of the most intense or heightened scene to shoot? I mean, there's so many scenes, and a lot of reviews said this too, you know, where you're like really uncomfortable, you want to look away but you can't. So kind of in your perspective, what was that like for you?
So for me, there is a scene that comes in the middle of the season, and anyone who has watched it will know what scene I'm talking about. And I knew about it, just going through the process of auditioning and being cast. I became aware of it. But I don't think there was any amount of preparing myself that I could have done to play in this scene, to be honest with you, because your body doesn't know when you're acting and when you're not. And for me, I felt every bit of what someone who is actually going through that would feel, what I imagine they would feel. And yeah, that for me was the scene that I can honestly say it really pushed me to my limits. But what got me through that is just, everyone from Ashley to the girls to LM, all the producers, the crew, everyone just really just covering me at that time and showing me so much love that really gave me the strength to get through that. But that was really, really hard. I remember shooting that scene, and in between every single take, some of the other actors who were in that scene would go to one room and break down, and I would go to one room and break down. And literally that would be our thing. It was something like I've never, ever experienced. But when I get the messages from people who say, to say the least, me too, that for me makes every single bit of that worth it, that I can, give a sort of, do my part to give a sort of voice to the voiceless. People have kind of gone through that to make them feel, seen and held by me, my performance in some type of way. So yeah, that was the scene for me that really, was it.
I assume that was season or episode 5, the scene that we're talking about.
Yeah.
So before we jump to Ashley, obviously, I did want to touch on that because there was also some sort of response to that particular scene we're speaking about. And, both Little Marvin and Deborah, how did you react to that backlash, for lack of a better term?
I didn't react to it, to be honest with you. For me, it's all about the truth in a situation for me. I think so many people, especially now, are so focused on trying to do what's right, but what is right, really? I think what people should be focused on is telling the truth. And for me, when acting in that scene, my biggest objective was to make sure that it was true, that anyone who had actually gone through that would be like, yep, I believe her. And maybe someone would actually believe them. So that was my honest reaction. I didn't really react to people who did. I knew, to be honest with you, I already knew that people would feel something, but I feel like that is where I feel like I've done my job, is if you watch it and you feel something, no matter what you feel. So yeah.
How do you Little Marvin, how do you write a scene like that? And, also specifically also about the the baby part of it. How do you write that scene, and how do you kind of discern how far to go?
I think you start by resisting the scene. Like, I had a very visceral reaction. That scene, you know, I think Deborah just sort of said everything really beautifully, in the sense that, like, I too, I didn't get caught up in the whatever the apparent the backlash around it, because at the end of the day, if you can sit in the truth of something and in the authenticity of something, you have to be prepared. You know, we knew going in that that's going to be a scene that's going to cause, you know, people to have reaction. I will say that in the writing of it, it came full bore from a nightmare. I mean, where a lot of things actually come, and especially with horror. And I had a dream about the scene, and I kind of roll over in bed and write notes into my phone, and then I'll wake up the next day and usually try to write what I just imagined. And I had a very visceral reaction. I threw the phone. I'm like, don't even contemplate that. That's not happening. And then over the course of the next like 48 hours, it kept haunting me. The scene haunted me. It was making me feel some kind of way inside, viscerally and emotionally and physically even, that, like, as an artist, I feel like it's our responsibility, our duty to explore the things that terrify us. So there was that piece. But at the same time, I have to live in the authenticity and the truth of that scene. And I wanted to unpack a history of violence and terror against Black folks in this country. And I wanted to see the institution of Jim Crow for the evil that it has actually been. The sense of not being safe in your home, the sense of not being safe in your body, the sense of your families not being safe. These are things that have haunted us as Black folks in this country from the dawn of this country all the way until today. We're still unpacking and reliving. And so if the scene can in some way, honor is a strange perhaps word to use in that regard because of the violence, but if it can be true, and if it can give voice to, as Deb said, the voiceless, you know, from our past and from our folk who have dealt with things approaching this, then I feel like you have to sit back and say, okay, it fired on all the cylinders it was meant to. People are going to have a reaction about it. But I think we could both, I know Deb and I together, and our director, I have to call out Janixa Bravo, who directed that episode, and also so beautifully held Deborah in those moments and created a bubble of safety around Deb, around the set. Yeah, that you can then sit with it, and then you have to let it go. And the reaction to it is the reaction to it.
Right. And Ashley, obviously you're not in that episode, so I was wondering, or not in that scene, sorry. What for you was an particularly intense scene to shoot?
I felt like I was in that scene because it's such a pivotal part of the piece, and I made sure that I was, you know, that I came to visit Deborah that day on the set and be with her in those moments, because I think we were a family for real on this show. It wasn't just actors coming together. So a lot of the things that we were all going through, we made sure that we kept each other together, and we were feeling what each other were feeling. You know, just checking in with each other, making sure everyone was okay. I think in terms of me, in terms of performance, making sure that I transformed into the character and sort of set Ashley aside and realized that it's not about me, it's about Henry. I think every scene sort of got to me. Like, every scene was as important. If you want to think of a standout scene, one that does stick out to me personally is there's a scene in episode 9 when Henry is tied to a chair and the two men are threatening to kill his daughters or do anything to his daughters, rape his daughters. He doesn't know what they're going to do. And I'm sort of tied to this chair, and I can't think of anything worse. I think that is any parent's worst dream, man or woman, that they can't protect their child. And in that, it's sort of triggering for him because something has already happened to his family. And my main objective was to get out of the chair. That was what I'd written in my process, to get off the chair. And even though I was physically tied to this chair, there was 2 times when I had broken out of the ropes and broke the arm off the chair and came up and stood up to fight these 2 men. And that's because I really felt like Shahadi and Melody were my daughters in that moment, because I had physically and mentally transformed myself into Henry. So I had to get off the chair. I had to do it. There was a situation in London where there's a tower that was set on fire called Grenfell. And I heard of a story of a boy that carried his mum from one of the high floors all the way downstairs on his back. He had to do that. And that, like, even thinking of that, that just got me emotional. When you love someone, what you're going to do for them. So these feelings of trauma within the character that was one of the hardest scenes for me to do, to see the little girls scared in that moment. I really felt that. So probably that was one of them. But there were so many scenes like like that. The roof scene, the scene in the theater. Every scene to me felt as important.
Right. And I always like to ask this question after Jennifer Lawrence said it when she was filming Mother, that she had to go and decompress after every, heavy scene, and she watched Keeping Up with Kardashians. That was her escape. So I was wondering, what did you both do to decompress after scenes like this?
What did I do to decompress?
He watched the Kardashians too. He's just
right. I was gonna say you better start talking. I'm gonna talk.
I would take one day a week to because Deborah and I were shooting almost every day. I would take one day a week to myself, and that would be to either hang out with friends or talk to my family back home or spend time with Deborah and the girls. Deborah would organize us going to the movie theater. And so we would go and watch movies and just really sort of like let our hair down and experience fun. And then on the Sunday I would get back to work. But I didn't talk to her. There was a counselor on set, but I didn't utilize that. And I decompressed after, I think, when I finished the job. I kept Henry with me for so long. And that was, for me, the way to deliver the character authentically, was putting Ashley aside and making sure that I fully gave myself in service to the character. So staying in the accent for the whole time, making sure that I'm constantly doing research. I wanted to live in Henry until I'd finished the job. And it was an extended period as well, because we had the pandemic. So where we were supposed to finish in March, we ended up finishing in September. And Deborah and myself, we both knew that we had to come back and finish the project as strong as we started. Also with those elements of the world changing. And we had, Black Lives Matter, and we had the murder of George Floyd, and we had all these things happening, all these world events happening around us. So to really pour that into the character, because that is part of the struggle of what's happening in the world. So just to make sure that when people saw this piece, they were proud of it, and they were proud of the performances, and everyone that's reached out, whether that be some of the top actors in the world and just the public who have seen the show. So many people have reached out to say, well done, or they really felt the piece, or they was touched by it. And that has helped me to really decompress, because it's like, okay, cool, putting myself through that journey was worth it. And then, I can start to understand what my purpose in life is, is to really touch people as an actor and deliver these important characters as authentically as possible.
Mm-hmm. And I do want to touch on the key timing of the show in a second, but I wanted to have Deborah weigh in, because I think I read somewhere that you went to therapy after the show. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I did. So I did utilize the therapist on set, and I got my own separate therapy afterwards. But I will say, Ashley, I feel like you were so much better at taking care of yourself during the process than I was. Like, Ashley would actually encourage me to go get a massage, do what I like during the weekends, because Ashley would explore the city. He would when he was off, he would make sure he was just not fully back to himself, but like just kind of enjoying himself and like enjoying life, you know. And I probably could have done a better job of that, you know. But yeah, I wanted to like tag on to that, like really took care of himself, working out, all that stuff. But so for me, like I honestly, like I just said, I could have done a better job of taking care of myself. I think I overestimated myself a bit. I thought, you know, I'm just gonna go in here, do my thing. As long as I sleep when I'm off, I'm good. But I think that if I could do it over, I think that as hindsight is 2020, I probably would have, you know, just done a better job of making sure that I nurture me, you know, during the process, without coming completely out of Lucky, because it was important for me to kind of stay in her. I mean, even during when we had to pause, I kept one foot in her, you know, until we were completely done. But at the same time, I think that it would have been helpful to just kind of nurture myself during the process, because, you know, it was really, really hard, as you can imagine. And yeah, but afterwards, I reconnected with a lot of my family and friends. Like, I'm used to talking to my family and friends every single day. And during the process, I mean, I didn't completely cut them off, but I really distanced myself, you know, and because I knew that they would remind me of me, like who I am, remind me that I'm loved, you know, remind me that I do belong with them. And so for me afterwards, it was just reconnecting with them and just being loved on. And it took time though. You know, there was a long while where I didn't feel like me. I think I was actually talking to Ashley and I was like, I missed myself. Like, I didn't feel like me for the longest time afterwards, you know? And there would actually be times when we would talk on the phone and he'd be like, yeah, there she is. You know, but there she go. There she, yeah. There she, honestly, you know, it was definitely worth it. That part I would not, you know, change, to just like really diving in and like leaving myself aside, you know, in order to play Lucky as truthfully as possible. But I think, you know, afterwards it was just getting back to life and really like doing what I enjoy. I will say during the process, I watched a lot of reality TV as well. And that's why when you said she watched the Kardashians, because I was watching all of the like reality shows you could think of, just to kind of, you know, be and I still think I'm still on that wave, to be honest with you, but that's a whole nother conversation.
I guess could I say that like in post, like during the show, I watched no reality because I was just making the show. But while we were in post production and editing the show, all I could watch was the Great British Bake Off. The only thing that brought my soul joy, like it was British people in a tent making cupcakes, and I felt so safe. Like that was my escape.
Yeah, for me it was Married at First Sight. It was well, I love House Hunters International. That's one of my things. I don't know, I'm so obsessed with it. Shark Tank. What else? I did watch the Kardashians. I watched I mean, I could go on. I was literally just Real Housewives of Potomac. I was all over the place. Yeah,
you were just cranking them out.
I was really in there. So that I did do. I will give myself that. So yeah, I feel like now I'm finally back to myself, which feels pretty good.
Yeah, and Little Marvin, you just said it yourself, like you wrote the show, then you know you had to watch the show come together, and then you edited it. So you were going through these waves of emotion and trauma like several times, right? So like, what's your escape minus the Great British Bake Off?
I don't know if I had an escape minus it. Before I answer that, I have to call out the genius of these two, because like you've seen the show, so you know it's quite an endurance test that these two were on. And to see them, I think of them as almost emotional athletes, Like they had to just be so strong. And I've been watching all these interviews with them because I'm just their biggest fans and their biggest stalker. And I've been watching everything and I've been hearing them say how scared they were while they were making the show. And it's so shocking to me because all I felt when I was there, I was in awe. I mean, we would all, the whole crew would literally gather around a monitor and watch these two every day do things. And also I have to call out Shahadi and Melody, just watch this, and Allison Pill and every actor in our cast, frankly, do these things. And it was to do that over the course of however many months. It was a long period that they were making it, and to have never wavered in their commitment to it. And to also, you get the sense that making a show like this, maybe the set would feel very heavy and it would be very dark. These two were smiling at people. They were like hugging everybody. They were hugging Melody and Shahadi. So it's like they're just they're absolute pros. And so I have to say that about them. But I would say that like I didn't really have an escape hatch. I think what helped me get through, strangely enough, was watching the Black Lives Matter movement light up across the globe. Watching people who didn't look like us honor our lives and honor our journeys and honor our pain. When that was happening, and I'm in the edit, deep in the edit, making this show, and then I'm stepping out of it into that and seeing that, to say seeing, and I call them the kids because they were, seeing the youth of the next generation kind of come together across races, across countries in support of Black lives, gave me that little boost, because here we were making this show that was about Black lives and going way back, and then seeing us together united in that moment. It was a deep moment. It was a profoundly emotional moment, but it was also sort of a hopeful moment. Yeah, it's not exactly the Great British Bake Off, but it did give me a sense of why we were making what we made, frankly, why we set out to make the show.
Talk to me a little bit about like the timing of when you wrote it and when you guys started production, because Ashley just said when the pandemic hit, you delayed the end of production, right? But when did you write this? Because obviously, like you said yourself, with everything that happened last year and the continued acts of racism in 2021, the series is coming, or did come out at a key time, and season 2 will, continue that.
Well, I think that the sobering piece about that is, frankly, this show could have been released any time in the last 100 years, if we want to be frank, and it would have been equally necessary to explore these themes. And that's the sobering facts of being Black in this country. That's just the truth about that. I started writing the pilot now. I want to go back. I don't even know what time is anymore because of the pandemic. I have no idea where we are, what year is it? But I think it was like 4 years now. It was going 4 years that I first wrote the pilot. And I was writing it during a summer, much like this past summer and the summer before it, where every day I was waking up and seeing Black folks terrorized in some way. And it was making me think about a history of that terror. It was making me think about my own experiences with that terror and with feeling othered and with feeling not quite safe in environments. And so, yeah, I have to say the fact that I started writing it 4 years ago and that it's released now, it's sobering. I mean, it's useful in the sense that it helps you feel good about why you made it. It validates why you made it, but it's also sobering that we're still going through these,
Right.
Right,
you're right. And I know that we're kind of running out of time, but I wanted to ask one logistical question because I thought it was so beautifully shot. The opening scene of where the family's driving into LA and just the like utopia of this neighborhood, right? The colorful houses, the colorful dresses, the like manicured lawns. It was just beautiful, and like recreating 1960s LA. What kind of research goes into that, and like how do you construct a set like that?
Well, you're giving me an opportunity to do what I love to do, which is call out the team, because this team was like, surround yourself with a band of geniuses and then everything looks good. That's really what it is. We had Tom Hammock, our production designer, who he's a genius, and he will hate me for calling him out. blushing somewhere if he sees this, because Tom doesn't like to be talking about himself. But the truth is, like, he really did an amazing feat in that he pledged fealty to the 1950s, because we have to, but at the same time, he warped it just ever so slightly. So it's got this dreamy, almost like it's just left of real. It's just left of Los Angeles. It's not quite Los Angeles. And I think that allows for the nightmare to feel more tangible. I have to call out Marianne Cheo, our genius again, costume designer, who put such intricate detail into everything. Like, if you're watching the show, I would suggest going back and watching it again just for the wardrobe, because there are spoilers in the wardrobe. She would literally come to me so many times. I thought she was crazy. She would come to me at the monitor, and she would like grab me and she'd be like, "There's a spoiler in that dress." And I'm like, "Go away." And then sure enough, we'd be sitting in the edit and I'm like, "Oh my God, there's a dog in that dress, or there's the trees in that dress, or there's like the collar of Miss Vera's dress is a book, the pages of a book." Like, that level of detail was put into everything.
Wow.
Howard Berger and Johnny Villeneuve, our entire team, I could call them all out. But that's how that looks like that, because of those people.
Interesting. Did you draw from any like classic horror movies or shows, you know, for any inspiration? I mean, like, shooting with these utopian colors, like you said, is very daytime Midsommar. You know, obviously that came out just 2 years ago, but that's kind of like, there are certain, you know, ideas that come through when you're watching it, which is great, which I love about horror.
Yeah, I mean, there was I'm going to call out two more people. The relationship between getting to work with Checo Varese, our lead DP, and getting to work with Nelson Cragg, our director, on the pilot. Like, we got to honor all of these influences that we all love. Like, we're all huge fans of 1960s and 1970s horror, particularly. So films like The Exorcist, The Shining is 1980, but you get the point. Don't Look Now. All of those movies have like a textural component. The use of split diopters is very much inspired by our love of Brian De Palma. In fact, I would have used a split diopter on every shot. It was Checo who Checo's like, "It's not cool, dude, if you use it on every shot. Like, let's just pick and choose." Because I'm a big nerd, I would have used it everywhere. But again, like, that was getting to work with these brilliant artists on really paying homage to those kind of classics. And I have to say, to see these two beautiful Black faces occupying the centers of those classic frames was the gift of a lifetime.
Great. That's a great way to end our talk. And I could talk about this forever and talk about horror with you guys forever. But thank you guys so much for joining me. It was lovely to speak to you guys. And for everyone who was watching, thank you so much for joining us today. It was great to have you all. Be sure to take advantage of our free trial to Wrap Pro and be first to know about upcoming Wrap screenings and events. And you can also register for any screenings you may have missed and more by visiting TheWrap.com screenings tab in the main navigation bar. Thank you guys again. Such a pleasure.
So much. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.